Sorry. Okay, so here I have a lot of windows opening now. What is Informatics Europe? Informatics Europe is a non-profit association, and our members are computer science institutions, in particular departments from various universities in Europe, but also institutes, faculties, and some research labs. The origin of Informatics Europe is dated back in 2005, where in a meeting there was this decision that we needed to have a European voice on computer science within academia. And so the association started. At the moment, we have 33 countries represented in the association with over 160 institutions. And as you can see here, we cover most of Europe. And of course, we are keen of including other institutions and other countries. So if you know an institution that is not included in Informatics Europe, and you may think there is an interest, there could be an interest, just let me know, and we will try to get in touch. So the objective is, as I said before, to create a strong common voice, to make sure that research and education in informatics in Europe is well developed. And so we promote concerted positions on education research and also social impact, which is becoming more and more important for informatics. And of course, we foster knowledge transfer and collaboration. Our activities are mainly performed by volunteers. I am one of these. I belong to I am part of the Informatics Europe board, and you would be more than welcome to join our activities, especially within the context of the working groups that are focusing on specific topics. So here you see the working groups that are currently active, that, as you can see, are focusing on education, but also on aspects related to society, so diversity and inclusion, societal impact and ethics, etc., etc. Within Informatics Europe, we run this annual conference, which is ECSS. And this year we will meet in Hamburg in October, and we have various sessions and various events. In particular, we have also an early career researchers workshop. This is specifically dedicated to people just starting working in the research field. And the objective is not, of course, to focus on a specific scientific subject, but to discuss about, let me call them cross-cutting issues, issues that are relevant to any young researcher in computer science. We have some keynotes. We have also other workshops. One of them is the WAR EUGAIN workshop. EUGAIN, as you will see, is also the COST Action that is promoting this specific webinar, and there are many other sessions. We have also some leadership courses that are running periodically, and we found out that they are very interesting and relevant, especially for young people, but not only for young people. So I mentioned already EUGAIN, which is a cost action focusing on gender aspects, and as you know, this talk in particular is framed within the context of the activities that are supported and developed by EUGAIN. And our speaker is Steve Kremer from Inria. And of course, he's a great scientist, but today he's focusing more on, let's say, soft skills, if you want, so good practices throughout the academic career from a PhD to professor. So I am very pleased to give the floor to Steve for his talk.
Okay, thanks a lot, and also thanks very much for the invitation and the possibility to speak here.
Let me try to stop sharing. Okay, here I found, okay.
Okay, and I will try to start sharing then. And let's see how this will work. And so you should be able to know.
Yes.
And now you should be able to see slides. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for the introduction. So as Elisabetta just said, I will be speaking about good practices throughout academic careers from PhD to professor. And first thing I should say is that this is actually not my area of expertise in research. So my research is actually not focused on gender equality and bias and things like that. But I have been working at Inria's Committee on Gender Equality and Equal Opportunities for now about 5 years. I've been co-leading this committee, where I have been interested in these questions, and yeah, I got some experience on these. And more recently, obviously, I have been involved in the EUGAIN network, where I'm working in the third working group, which is called From PhD to Professor. And some research that we have recently done was to collect best practices on all the stages of the career from PhD to professor, and have them together in a booklet. And so today I will be speaking a little bit about results from what is in this booklet that you can actually find on the EUGAIN website. If you go into the deliverables, there you can find this booklet, and also some things that are my experience at Inria in this committee. Okay, maybe before we start, we should ask ourselves, why do we want actually gender balance? Why do we want this diversity? And I think that my thesis is that gender equality and diversity are really important if you want to have good quality in your research. And there are many reasons for this. I'm listing some of them here. The first thing, of course, is why would you want to dismiss 50% of the talents that you can get? Why wouldn't you not exploit all of them? Because they can be, I mean, they are incredibly gifted women, and we should give them the same chances as for men, even though we see that the numbers show that currently we're not at 50%, of course. I think that diversity is also very attractive. Once you start having a diverse institute, it's also very attractive for other people to join it, even diverse and above all diverse people. So from that point of view, I think it's really a win for your institute. And completely different reason is also to be maybe more representative of society. So often we have seen that there can be some mistrust that is coming towards a scientific elite, some of which was witnessed also during the pandemic, maybe in some countries. So if we are more representative of society, there might be also a better acceptance of the scientific results that we have. And last but not least, I think also that we can improve well-being at work by having a more diverse population in our institutes. So all of this said, I think being here at the seminar, most people are already convinced that diversity is actually a good thing to have and that we should work on it. And I will not show the many numbers that show that currently we don't have it. I think that most of you already know this. So I will go a little bit through best practices that we can have at basically all stages of the career, starting from recruitment. How should we evaluate applications? How can we avoid bias in these applications, be it for hiring or promotion? What can we do to retain talents also once they have been hired? And finally, an important part is also what can we do to get women promoted? As we will see currently, there's a phenomenon called glass ceiling that is quite present, and that hinders promotion of women with respect to men often. Okay, so let's start a little bit talking about recruiting. So one first thing I think is that we need to battle stereotypes and bias. And so there have been studies that have shown that actually bias against women does affect recruitment advertisements. So here on the slide, I'm showing you one example, which is from the former website of Inria. So this has been changed now with our committee. We have been working on this, where you could see that, for instance, for the lowest, let's say, or the most starting career positions, for instance, postdoc, you have a picture with just one woman. If you go for something equivalent to assistant professor, you start having one man plus one woman. For associate professor advertisements, you have one man on the picture, and for full professors, you have two men on the picture. So this might look a little bit like an anecdote, but it's the whole image that we are conveying with these pictures and with the language that we use. So it's really important, starting already from the recruitment advertisements, to use basically inclusive language. You should state that if it is the case that your employer is an equal opportunity employer, you should advertise this. If you want to attract more women, you should also state things like flexible working conditions and how you realize them at your institutions. All of this is really, really important, I think, from the start when you're starting to advertisement. And also do the advertisement in the right way. Don't wait for the last minute. If you want to get many candidates, advertise on time. This seems like a stupid thing to say, but also if you advertise on time, you will have more female applicants or more diverse applicants, because it takes time to prepare a good application. And so also, probably you should also approach candidates both directly and indirectly. What I want to say like this is, why not directly contact good female researchers if you want them to apply, or ask colleagues indirectly if they know good female applicants that could be suited for the position that you want to advertise. It's just very practical things that you should do in order to get more candidates, more applications, and so you have a better choice. And all of this will definitely result into having more women applying, and also probably allows you to recruit more women. Another thing that you may consider is, for instance, the use of dedicated channels. If there are, for instance, mailing lists from national women tech networks or things like that, that are spreading, that are more and more frequent in many countries, you could, for instance, consider sending your advertisements to these particular networks. And another question that one may ask is, what if we don't have enough female applicants? What are the questions what are the actions that we could take in that case? And this is something that you should think about it before, and not just start at the moment where you realize it, when you start asking the question what you should do. For instance, in general, if you have a position and you don't get enough good applications in general, you might want to reopen the position or change the deadline. So you might want to do the same thing if you think that you didn't get enough suitable female applications. So these are very practical things that you can do. In some countries, they are thinking about setting up quotas or having dedicated positions. And so one nice model that I have seen, this is one example that has been used in several German research institutions, including, for instance, the Helmholtz Institute, as to use a cascade model. What this means that they're actually having flexible quotas. It means that if you want to, at level n-1, you have an actual percentage, well, then you should have quotas with probably the same percentage at level n or something similar. So they are kind of complicated formulas, but basically the idea is that percentage of level n should depend on the actual percentage of at level n-1. This can be evidence, for instance, for full professor. You should look how many associate professors, female associate professors, are there in our country. Take this percentage and think about how you can get flexible quotas from this. And I think it's a very nice example. It's because it's very plain and square. So you have a formula that tells you what is the quota that you should use. So it's not something arbitrary that you put into place. It's something where you can explain these quotas. So these are just some of the ideas of what you can look already at the level of advertisement, at the level really of the recruitment, on how many positions you should open, should you have quotas or not. And now, of course, the next state is once we get applications, how can we evaluate them, and what should we be careful about when we are doing interviews? First of all, a basic question is, does there exist bias in interviews? And even though this might be a kind of a feeling that we have, and that there is bias against minorities or against women in interviews, it is very hard to prove actually that this exists. Yet there has been a scientific study by Golden and Rose. This is already a few years ago, and the study was done in a very male-dominated context of prestigious symphony orchestras in the US. So the thing was that basically they had auditions, and one thing that they noted is that they would basically recruit nearly only men. And then the experiment that they made is that they changed to blind auditions. So this works, of course, very well for symphony orchestra because you don't need to see the person, you just need to hear this person. And what they realized is that they started recruiting many more women. So this is a way of empirically proving that bias is actually, it does exist. And so we should not doubt about the fact that we are biased. So and we should think about what we can do about it. So one of the basic things is probably already to organize some training about unconscious and implicit gender bias for the panel members. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is how we actually do this at Inria. So this is also my own experience, having served on many of these committees and having served on the Gender Equality Committee as well, that has put this into place. So we're actually looking at having a charter on gender equality and opportunities that really tells you what is the things that all the persons need to do and how we want to reduce this bias and be more fair to everyone. So the third thing is also already for the chair of the committee. So first of all, one of the things is to raise awareness before we start anything looking at the first application. So recall that bias does exist, that stereotypes do exist, and they can really influence our judgment. There are actually also a lot of documents and resources that are illustrating this and explaining these biases. So as the chair of the committee, you should at the beginning point to these documents to the whole committee, and we generally also in an email that we're sending to all committee members, we're suggesting them to view a short video that was created for ERC panels. It's 8 minutes, it's very short, so which illustrates many of these biases and how they exist and how you can handle them. The second thing is that you should actually also do monitoring. So what we do is that for each committee, we actually appoint 2 persons inside the committee. We're generally asking for volunteers that are gender equality and equal opportunity leads. And their job is to, from the beginning, especially monitor all these cases, maintain statistics. So if they are basically, if you have n percentage of applicants at the beginning, then at each phase of the hiring, you should still have n percent of women. Otherwise, we are losing them. This is sometimes called the leaky pipeline, and it means something probably went wrong, or at least we should question ourselves whether something went wrong. So it does not mean that we need to necessarily keep exactly the same percentage, but if we are not at it, we should question ourselves whether some bias has happened. And other things is also really prepare the documents. So what we do is we prepare the review templates. So where you have to keep track of things like career breaks, number of children, seniority rather than age. So how many years ago did you defend your PhD thesis rather than how old are you, or things like that. So evaluation summaries must be sent before the meetings so that we can review them, so that we all get the same information. And all of this can help actually to reduce bias. So that's the idea. Oh. Do you still hear me? I think.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I think so the next thing is, so how can the jury members act to avoid bias? Well, the first thing, of course, is to look at the documents that have been sent, and really should encourage them to watch this video or any other resources that you want.
Sorry, Steve, I don't know. We don't see the screen sharing at this point.
Okay, the screen sharing stopped. So let me try to start it again. Something happened here. I don't know exactly, but let me see how I can fix this. Okay. Screen sharing this. So you should see it again.
Now we see it again.
Okay, sorry for this. Well, even after 3 years or something like that of remote conferences, it's still breaking. Okay, so what I just said is also for jury members, how can they avoid bias? Well, the first thing is look at the documents, try to get aware of these biases, learn about it. So that's one of the first things. When at the different stages of the hiring process, when you recall the candidate's background and career, be very careful about the way you present it. Always recall that, for instance, as an example, a maternity leave is not just a few weeks of leave. It has a much longer impact on your career. So, for instance, ERC's counts 18 months. The exact number can be fine-tuned, of course, but it's just to give you one example. And you should be very careful about the bias when recalling the files and during hearings, so the interviews actually, because these biases, they can actually very much influence our judgment. So there are effects like, for instance, the halo effect, where somebody belonging to the majority will be treated really differently. So, for instance, you can say that somebody, just because he graduated, let's say, at Stanford or at Princeton or at some very famous university, you will not question his competence. While on the other hand, the solo effect means that if somebody is in a minority, you have generally a different judgment. You will question his skills and everything. This is also called a double standard. So for one, you will assume that he's actually very competent, while for the other person, you might doubt it, and the person has to demonstrate the skills, while for other they are taken as granted. And of course, this all reflects also in the presentations, be it written or oral. So you have many things that can many stereotypes that can come out there, and also some people will tune down their contributions, while other people will tend to actually enforce them and really underline what they have done. So you have to be very careful in the style, which can be very different. And one last example that I wanted to give on this topic is our recommendation letters. So there has been actually a study which was done in the context of large medical schools, where they have actually studied a lot of recommendation letters, and they showed that actually the style of the wordings of this letter will differ between male applicants. So you will find for male applicants things like words like leadership, excellence, is very ambitious, he has a lot of potential and things like that. Or something saying he is a recognized first-class specialist. While for women, you would find adjectives like serious, competent, generous, caring, or things like that. And maybe a phrasing saying she could possibly become a first-class specialist. So there are already doubts that are put into the letters. So when I first heard this, I actually thought this couldn't be true. But then I served during 5 years on Inria committees, on these evaluation committees, and I think I could do quite well in a blind test by now. And even if letters are anonymized, know what is the gender of the recommended person. So you really see that this happens. And so what we started doing is that human resources actually, when they contact recommenders to ask them for their recommendation letter, they would actually include in the email pieces of advice about this and point to some documentation. So we're really contacting the people and informing them that these biases exist and that they should be careful about them. Okay, then after having hired basically people, then there's also the question on how can we actually retain them? How can we keep them in our institutions? And basically, one of the crucial things is the working environment. So again, there has been several studies that show that the culture of the organization will have a direct impact on whether women will stay in the organization or leave to find something that suits them better. And so some of the things that we should be very careful about is, for instance, having a family-friendly working environment. So I'm just listing a few things about these. So for instance, that's a very concrete thing is when you're scheduling your meetings, please be aware that some people need to fetch their children. So this is actually for all young parents. So one should have, for instance, a rule, depending on the country, to say that meetings should not go later than 5 o'clock. That's just one example. It depends really on the countries, how you should put this into place. But make it possible for young parents to exist in the work and do their work correctly. And also, you should, for instance, as an institution or as a group leader, honor your right to disconnect. What does that mean? It means stop sending out emails at 10 o'clock in the evening, expecting to get a response, a reply, or send them during the weekend, expecting them, the people to reply, because it's a kind of, by doing this, you're expecting people to be all the time connected, all the time ready to work. So these are bad practices that you should ban. More generally, you should, of course, promote an inclusive working environment, and also not only just promote it, but also have budget for these initiatives. If they are nice initiatives, then you should also fund them. And very importantly, as also if people spend time on things like gender balance initiatives, then you should acknowledge this and give them credit for this. So take away other tasks that they might have. So for instance, if somebody is leading a gender committee, you might consider saying that he has one course less to give, rather than assuming, as it is very often done, that this is done on your spare time. So these are things that we have seen quite a lot. Another aspect, just to give you another example, is about harassment, where again, unfortunately, women are generally more the victims than men. So at Inria, I had to follow one serious case of harassment, And at the end, it finished with one person being fired from India. And this is something very serious. I think it's the first time that that a person has been fired because of sexual harassment, and it's also well, it's a very serious statement, and it also shows that that we're taking this seriously. And these are kind of things that are really not possible in a public institution. So you should, from the beginning, communicate about this and say that these kind of things are not possible in an institute, and also acknowledge that harassment does exist, like everywhere. It's not because we're in academia that it wouldn't exist. So these are things that you should take into account very carefully and have actions around it. And just one example that I wanted to give, which is also related to having a family-friendly environment, as for instance, childcare at conferences. And so I'm giving you one example, which is the example of Schloss-Dagstuhl. Some people might know Schloss-Dagstuhl. It's actually a facility for conferences located in Germany, which is conferences in computer science. And Schloss-Dagstuhl has actually a very nice service, is that if young parents could not attend because they don't have, because of lack of childcare, they actually give you the opportunity to come with your child. And you can choose to bring a caregiver of your choice if you want, and they would actually the meeting would be free for the caregiver, so free room and free board, and they will take this into account. Or if you cannot bring a caregiver, they actually have a nanny at Schloss Dagstuhl, which can take care of the children during the day. So I have myself experienced this, because at some moment my wife was still breastfeeding our youngest daughter, and she was invited to Schloss Dagstuhl, and so she went there, and this worked really very nicely. So I think these are all quite nice initiatives that we can take examples from. So if you're organizing a conference, this is something that you may want to take into account and think about these activities. And so one last of the aspects is about promoting women. So so I had already mentioned the leaky pipeline or glass ceiling. So because what we see is generally that we have already some improvements in gender balance at PhD level and early stage research positions. It's certainly not yet satisfactory, but things are getting worse if you go further in the career, if you go to leading positions like for professor or other leading positions. So currently what we see is that the progress there is really less significant than at early stage in an early stage career. So certainly, therefore, one should ensure that women are actually involved in all the decision-making positions. So if you also include women in director positions and things like that, then it's much easier to actually also see what we can do and show that it is possible to have women promoted. They will be much more generally aware of the problems, and so I think this is really something that needs to be done. Other things is also for their CVs, you should always ensure that there is a female representation. If you have a conference with invited speakers for prestigious tasks like being member of a program committee, so if you're organizing conferences, then you should ensure that you also have a female representation. So one of the things that we're now doing at Inria is if the organizer of a conference is from Inria, and if we don't have a reasonable representation of women, we will cut financial support. This is something. This is a decision that was made by Inria, and so if we spot it, then this can go up to cutting financial support. We generally try to first actually encourage having female representation, but if nothing is done, we could go until cutting financial support. Another thing that has been done in many places is run a mentoring program where you actually can also help women and other minorities to know the system, to see what is expected actually in order to get promoted. What are the things that you should do? Learn about the system, and get help for this, or just also fight censorship of themselves. Some people think that they are not ready for promotion while they actually could. And again, related to this, there's a very nice program that they're currently running at the Computer Science Department at UCL, University College London, in the UK, where they're actually thinking, they have thought about changing completely the paradigm. So what they are doing is actually, they are switching from an opt-in to an opt-out default. So this was also something that has been identified in a scientific publication, and they are actually implementing this at UCL. And the idea is that basically everybody who is not a full professor each year will submit a CV. So rather than saying that if you want to get promoted, you have to submit a CV, they will ask everybody to submit an updated CV. And then there is a committee. So this is a little bit of work, of course, but there's a committee at the CEST department, which is composed of the full professors that will identify candidates for promotion and help them with their dossier to be submitted at the university level. So here they're kind of fighting this censorship, and they're trying to also give them feedback and look at every CV every year in order to increase female promotion. Okay, so these are all kind of examples of what you can do, but obviously there is no silver bullet. I mean, these are just ideas, good practices that I have encountered both at Inria and also while working in the EUGAIN project. But we don't have a real solution yet. But I think all of them are kind of helping to get better balance. Of course, obviously, not all good practices fit every system, and definitely they need to be adapted. But I think they can be great source of ideas if you look on how things are going on in other places. As I said, we're still on the beginning. There's a lot of more things that would be needed to be done. If you look at the numbers, we're still far away from having 50% female and 50% male, and having other minorities represented. So we're not there yet. More ideas are needed, more work is needed on this. And obviously, what I've been speaking about is just one part of the problem, because if you don't have a lot of already girls that want to go for scientific studies or careers in the first place, it's difficult to get more candidates. It's difficult to get women in full professorship positions. And so there are also other working groups at EUGAIN that looking at these aspects early in the career. And so if you're interested in them, I'm also encouraging you to look at the work that has been done in other working groups of EUGAIN. So thank you. That's it for me, and I will be happy to discuss a little bit more and take your questions.
Thank you very much, Steve. So I realize now that we are actually doing something which is against your rules, in particular having a seminar after 5 o'clock. So I do apologize for this. Maybe we should change the schedule. But
no problem. Let me just stop to share so I can see you and you can see each other. That will be maybe easier for questions.
Yes. I don't see your, I mean, the camera, your camera seems to be not working.
Yes, I'm turning it on again.
Okay,
so see me again.
Now we see you. Okay, so are there questions for Steve? One question I have is concerning the experience you have regarding the actual involvement and interest of, let's say, male in what you just said. No, I am here looking at the faces here. I see that there are, besides you, I think there are only 2 other men in this seminar. And so and this is quite natural, but the point is that you have been talking about specific actions in your institution. So I guess in your institution there is a significant interest by everybody, not only women, in this. So what is your experience, and what would you suggest to make sure that everybody, so not only women, is perceiving this as an issue?
Yes, so yeah, first I should say it's actually a very interesting experience also being male and being working on this kind of questions, because for once it's a kind of opposite situation where we are the minority. So it's an interesting experience to live this. So that's the first thing that I should say. So I think it's very interesting to be once myself the minority. On the other hand, of course, I've been talking about Inria, but also Inria, if you look at the gender equality committees, of course, the proportions, they are inverse, like everywhere, about these questions. So there's a lot of work, and one of the things, maybe also from my experience, is that at the very beginning, I did actually not feel kind of in my right position, being a male, not experiencing these kind of minority issues. Who am I to speak about them, and am I actually a rightful person to get involved into this? And I think that maybe I'm not the only person thinking about this, having experienced this. So I think we need to actually individually contact persons that we think should get involved, male researchers that we would like to get involved, and contact them personally. And many of them, I guess, would be happy to get involved, and actually didn't dare to volunteer at the beginning, maybe.
Thank you. So I think that Simona raised the hand. Sorry, apologies. I don't see the hand raised, but I trust Patricia. And then there is a question by Linda on the chat. But maybe Simona, you can go first.
Thank you for seeing me. Steve, thank you very much for the presentation. It was useful to find out how things are happening in other places. I should say that I'm from Romania, which somehow stands very well in the percentages of women in computer science and also in academia. I can say that I am very peculiar department. Our dean is a woman, our head of department is a woman, so it just happened. The men in our department did not want to manage things. But the things are not very good for a younger generation of women in academics. So I remember from your presentation the fact that they need to feel that their working place is inclusive. If you can give one or two examples how to do that, I will appreciate. Thank you.
Okay. Well, one of the things, for instance, that we had set up here at Inria was funding for childcare if you're going to a conference. So that is a little bit the other way around. So one of the things that we had done, that's for young parents more in general, but as you were talking about early career, basically also, I think that's something that can happen. So you have to leave to a conference, for instance, you're not there early in the morning or late in the evening. So it is possible at Inria, for instance, that we set up the possibility to ask for funding to have childcare at home. So that's something that we put into place. What else could we talk about? We have actions. One of the things that I mentioned were about we had several days that we organized about the topic of sexual harassment, which is of course not only for women, but nevertheless, if you look at the statistics, the victims are often more women than men. And so from that point of view, it was kind of really also to say that we care about these behaviors, they are not tolerable. This can start with very stupid things like jokes that are misplaced or things like that, that I'm sure many of you have already heard. And I mean, these are things that happen in a male-dominated context often. So there are many possibilities. So these are just two examples that I gave. Be inclusive. One of the things that we are doing that is currently, that we are at the moment working on at Inria, that I'm involved in, is that we are going to soon have a charter for actually LGBTI persons, so lesbians, but also trans-identitary persons. So we realized that actually we have a population that is in this situation, and already just stating that we want to have an environment where they can that they can feel okay as something very important. And then there are many practical things related to this, like, are you allowed to change your first name on your on our card that we have, on our badge, or things like that? There's some people that have changed their first name because they changed gender. So these are kind of very practical things. And the first time that I had somebody here in my building that tried to change her name, and the first reaction was, this is not possible, because on your passport you still have a different name, while it actually is according to French law, but people were not aware of this. So these are kind of the things that we can work on. This is a very very practical example where we can show that we are actually an inclusive institution. And just working with the people, also the people that were responsible for the badges, telling them that this is something that we should do. And now what we want to do is really have a charter that is stating these things, that they are possible, and that we want to work on this. So this means that they're actually rightful when they're asking for these kind of changes. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, so. You did. Thank you.
Okay, then we have a question by Linda on the chat. Does Inria have any statistics showing that the percentage of women has increased in the last few years? Oh, sorry, Linda, you were... Please, if you want to add anything to your question.
Yeah, no, so it's a little bit that when we put together the Informatics Europe booklet on more women in informatics, we included the points we felt would help, but evidence is very sparse. So the more evidence we have, the better chance we have to actually perhaps create a new edition of the booklet and include the effectiveness of the different suggestions that not just you, but others in the community have. So any thoughts would be wonderful.
Oh, hi Linda, first, and thanks for the question. This is an excellent question. That's really something that we, the evaluation of these kind of good practices is really important. So I have to admit that we are still kind of in the beginning of this evaluation, but we now have at Inria in our committee, we have somebody who is now working with statisticians really to try to have a look at all the numbers and try to see really to get indicators whether what worked, what didn't work, and things like that. But it is, I have to admit, it is complicated, because this means that they have to work with human resources about this, because they need to get access to the numbers. They need to get access to things like number of children or things like that, which are sensitive information. And so it all went quite slowly at the beginning, and now we start getting first results. So I have to admit that I'm still waiting for them. So my friend here in the committee said that they start to have results, but I haven't seen them yet. So I'm myself waiting for them, and that's also something that we want to do in EUGAIN, is to try to see whether we have evidence of some of these practices that really work. So that's something that is definitely on the top of our list. We currently don't have any concrete things. Some first results nevertheless showed that since we put in our committees these gender equality and equal opportunity leads, the number of women that got hired went up. That is something that we have seen. So there are first results, but we still have small numbers. So it's very difficult to interpret. And so we're still a little bit careful about what we're saying about this.
If anyone's good at maths, it's Inria. But also, alternatively, we've been holding the Minerva Award for a number of years. And as far as I'm aware, the submissions for the Minerva Award includes some sort of evidence. So maybe it's useful for someone to go through all those and see if there's anything we can pull out and publicize more widely.
So definitely there has been, for instance, just to give you another example, there's a mentoring program that has started at Inria in Rennes, and they also have already first evidence that it's really helpful. The number of habilitation theses, for instance, went up significantly. That's one of the examples that I could cite here as well. But definitely, we actually have been looking also when we were preparing the booklet. We had been looking at the Minerva submissions because it's a really it's a very good place to look for examples that did work and they have evidence. One of the examples that I have shown is the one from UCL. I think that was a Minerva Award a few years ago. So we're having this, definitely we're looking at these.
Great. So there is also a question by Bara. I don't know if Bara wants to speak or I just read the question.
I do not have a camera, but I can ask the question. So basically, Steve, there are like many things that influence, right, the gender balance in academia. If you were about to design a training and you would need to focus on just a few points, what would you say is the most important to explain, namely in people in academia? What things, for example, they are hesitant to understand, or they don't really understand, or like, what is your experience on this? Like, what is the most important to explain, emphasize, to get understanding on?
Okay, it's of course there are many things that are popping up, but if I would focus on one thing in the training, is maybe about bias and stereotypes. Basically, in my experience, what I've seen is that in academia, we are all very much educated people and very smart people. And people still believe that in academia, these stereotypes and these biases don't exist. They're still convinced. I've seen many people that are very much convinced that they are not biased when looking at applications. And this is just not true. I am biased when I'm looking at applications. Everybody is, and we just need to become aware of it and learn how we can react to our bias and identify it. And I really think that this would be this would be a crucial thing to put into a training, is to explain how these stereotypes influence ourselves and how bias can influence our judgment. So if I have to pick one, I could pick.
That's perfect. And maybe one follow-up question. So when you were preparing the booklet and going through the Minerva Award applications, did you see some like country-related specifics that you could say different things need to be emphasized for different countries?
One of the examples, well, definitely there are many things that are very specific to countries and culture. For instance, so this is not this was not related to the Minerva Awards, but we had somebody, we had Gunnar in our working group, and for him, for instance, this question about not having meetings late in the evening, he wouldn't even consider this as being a problem. He said this does not exist. I think he was he from Sweden or Norway? I might be wrong about this. Sorry, but he said, of course, and in my place, it's normal that all the meetings stop and that everybody would go and pick up the children. So this was kind of not a problem at all. So of course, there are things that are very much related to the culture and might be problems at some place, but not at other places. So this is definitely, I mean, some of these good practices don't make sense in some places, or are not necessary to put into place, or are already there naturally. So this is obviously very much related to different cultures.
It was coming to my mind. It would be so interesting to create a questionnaire to rate people, like how much present this thing is in your country, and try to, you know, like collect some understanding of the differences between countries. I think it would be very interesting. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for a great talk.
Yeah, I also agree with this. Thanks for your question and comments, Bara.
So I think there is a comment by Patricia in the chat. Patricia, you want to elaborate?
Yes, because also we apply a lot of well, significant training also throughout the years, and still there are embedded biases that are regularly used to select candidates in certain directions. So recently, what I found very useful is initiatives from colleagues that write down comparing and contrasting applicants on both qualitative and quantitative aspects, so that when we have when we are faced with this comparison, we can better identify biases, and we have less arguments about well, putting forward a bias, so to speak. Because the training often people follow because they have to, but it's not, if you are not convinced, then they are not always that effective.
Yes. So I think, yeah, I think you somehow need both. Of course, one of the things that we have been working on is to have, for instance, your review has to follow a given template in order to make it really as objective as possible, and have all the necessary information, all the information that we think is important should be there and in a visible form. But having a too strict template can be dangerous as well, because we also want to have sometimes kind of atypical careers that we want to value. Because what I'm always saying, it is better to have somebody who is good and just who has one outstanding point than somebody at a recruitment who is kind of good at everything but doesn't have anything standing out. So yes, there's this danger when you're really too much comparing. So it's I mean, it's a difficult exercise, and obviously there's no good solution. But definitely it is important to also be as objective as possible. And this, one of the things that you can do is to have a review template. For instance, one thing that we changed in the review template is to have career breaks on the first page, while they used to be in the miscellaneous section on the last page, and everybody would forget about them when summarizing the application files or things like that. And the other obvious thing is that, and it's very difficult, is to go for qualitative and not quantitative evaluation. And so one of the things that we are now trying to put into place is that in your application, rather than just giving the list of everything that you have done, you have to select, depending on whether it is junior, 3 or 5 works that you would really like to put forward. And this is what we will focus on. So actually, you are selecting a few works that you think we should focus on, rather than saying, okay, he has 120 publications, but what are the important ones? So that's maybe one way of going into that direction.
Yeah, in the chat, Kitvan pasted the link to the best practices that are derived from the Minerva Award applications. As far as I understand, they are updated. At least I see that's the one from 2021, 2018. So they are updated, just to answer to Linda's point. So I guess this is not maybe is enriched with respect to the 2016 booklet. And Simona is also pointing at the EUGAIN booklet. So these are good, useful sources for us to read. Is there any other comment, question, discussion point? Okay, if not, let me thank Steve for the great talk. Certainly it is, I mean, a hot topic for us, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
So,
a lot.
Kitvan, do you want to add something? Am I forgetting something?
Our next webinar will be on October 10th with Simona as our next presenter. More details can be found on our webinar page on our Informatics Europe website.
Great. Maybe, just a quick question on the schedule of these webinars. Do you think that 5 o'clock is fine, or we should really anticipate? Now I have this doubt about the schedule.
It's 6 o'clock for me.
So it's even worse. So maybe, Kitvan, maybe this should be anticipated to 4 o'clock our time, which at least is 5 o'clock Simona's time.
The only thing is that we sent out the times of this a long time ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So we can change it, but the advertising has to be very clear.
We have actually a discussion about this topic before, if Elizabeth and I have forgot about it. But we have actually different opinions. Bara is not here anymore, I think. I think she has a different opinion about this topic, like for some, yeah, that might be difficult for young parents, but sometimes like webinars like this, they see she see it as like a leisure activity. She can be home with her children and then listening the webinar at the same time, taking care of the kids at the same time, so it's not that bad. So I can see there are different people have yeah, so it's very interesting. And then we are all across Europe. It's very hard to find a, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I am fine with this schedule. I actually was probably the one that initiated this schedule because this is the right time for me. But I understand that probably. So I was feeling kind of guilty, I have to say. So
but it is good that we are trying to learn from, already apply what we learned from this webinar to be more inclusive as possible.
So sorry, I didn't want to mess up with your schedule with my talk. And one thing that I should also say is that as you record the talk, it's also possible to watch it later. And here the situation is slightly different because it's not a meeting that you really have to attend. And so maybe the situation is still a little bit different with such a webinar than with a working meeting. So just wanted to add this.
Okay, so I guess, Simona, that for the moment we keep this schedule and then we'll see.
I have accepted it. No, it's no problem.
Okay. Thank you very much then. Thank you all. It has been a pleasure.
Love to see you all. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.